Hi guys, so today we are going to be introducing ancient Greece and talking about the Archaic period in particular as it relates to our content area to AP Art History. So ancient Greece is one of those ones that we as a culture kind of know a little bit more about, learn more as we're growing up, and is more in our day-to-day lives because it is popular in media. And that's a good sign of how impactful that ancient Greece is actually going to be to our European development and then into our US development as well. So Greece is going to really set the stage culturally for a lot of what we learn in the future. However, Greece is also influenced by the past as well and whoever their neighbors were. So as an introduction, I would like you guys to label these important areas on your map. So if you look in your packet, the little tiny map, I do want you to label them. So we have the Aegean Sea, so right in here. So make sure you know where your sea is, because the Greece is a collection of islands and a peninsula, meaning it has water on three sides. We also have the Ionian Sea over here on this side, so kind of Italy off to this area here. We have the Mediterranean Sea, which is why we have Greece in content area 2. We're looking at the ancient Mediterranean. Then some couple important areas. Athens is going to keep coming back for us. It's right here towards the southern part of the peninsula. Mount Olympus, I am having you guys label because Mount Olympus is going to be seen as kind of where the heavens are, where the gods are located, but it's an actual mountain as well. We see that a lot in different cultures in which their tallest point becomes like the center of the world, the axis mundi. We'll get in that way more in Hinduism, but for now, label Mount Olympus. We do have Mycenae over here, so there's second like little section of peninsula over here. So Mycenae, we have Crete is the whole island here. Thebes is an important city. You will have to find Thebes. Sparta is another one, so you can click on the maps to locate those. Corinth, Knossos, Troy, and Asia Minor. So most of them are here. You can click on the link to find the others. And I also have the maps here too. So whatever you need to do to get those locations. So there's Corinth is an important city. Thebes is an important city. Lots of important cities. We're kind of just focusing on a few. Talking about the development of Greece, it's weird to me that AP Art History does not cover any works from the Minoans and Mycenaeans, but we're trying to cram all of history into 250 artworks, so they get a little bit cut out. However, these two cultures exist prior to the ancient Greece that we study, but it sets a lot of the stage for what Greece becomes. So the Minoans are around 1500 BC, so they're pre-Greece or proto-Greece. They live on Crete. So that island down here, this is where the Minoans are, right there. They are doing real well. So this is around the same time as ancient Egypt flourishing. We have Mesopotamia going on. So this is all the same exact time. Because they are an island, we see kind of like how we studied Pacific, which is later in time, that island is influencing their art. So they have a lot of aquatic theming. So you see dolphins, you see octopi, water in general, fish, etc. So they really tie their art to the sea. They have this famous mural here of people leaping over a bull, kind of showing off that culture. And then we have the start of a lot of the Grecian mythology that we know, like the Minotaur, Minos, Minoans, right? So it's named after kind of this culture, the Minotaur, or Minotaur being the half bull, half man, top half bull. We also have the Mycenaeans. The Mycenaeans are more of your mainland Greece, so where Greece ends up being focused on Mycenae, the city. The Mycenaeans, 1300 BCE, they're right up to what the Greeks are, of what we consider like actual Greeks. Mycenaean have very specific culture. They're more kind of defensive in their architecture. They have these funerary traditions that are going to look a lot like the Etruscans that we look at later, where they have underground tombs with these domed, fortified kind of indicator. I forget what the name is off the top of my head. It has a name. We'll get it to it in the Etruscans. They have bright colors. There's this weird piece, which I wish was in the 250 because it's an archaeological nightmare a little bit, but a very interesting culture that also sets the stage for Greece. We, again, don't have them in our 250. I don't want to ignore them. They're kind of important for understanding who the Greeks are. So they're not going to be on the test, but know them. Minoans, Mycenaeans. We actually don't know too much about the Minoans because their language still hasn't been translated fully. I believe it's the Minoans. Linear A and Linear B are the two languages. Linear A has not been translated. When we actually get into the Greeks, now talking about the Greeks, we have three major artistic and historical periods in which we are categorizing our artworks. So it's going to be archaic, classical, and Hellenistic. In this video, we're just focusing on archaic statues. However, Greece, when you are on the test, you're going to want to be able to differentiate between each of these time periods. Greece alone is not a good identifier, so you want archaic Greece, classical Greece, Hellenistic Greece. A lot of the FRQs and questions like to talk about kind of that tradition and change that you see from early Greece to the end of Greece. So our archaic period is about 600 to 480 BCE, and it sets the stage for who the Greeks are. And you can see how big of a jump we are between the Mycenaeans to what we're considering the Greeks here. We have the solidification of city-states. A city-state is it's bigger than a city, smaller than a state is how I like to think about it. So like Athens and Sparta, these cities that have their own form of government. And government is going to be huge for the Greeks. So the archaic Greeks are going to get rid of the Persians who are in the area. Remember Darius and Xerxes and our Apandana. That building's a little after this period, but the Greeks do push the Persians out. Athens does get destroyed though within war in 480 BCE, and that war, the Peloponnesian War, kind of separates the archaic to the classical period. Visually, when we look at archaic, it's very stiff, very rigid, very inspired by Egyptian and Mesopotamian art, but with a Greek spin. Classical is about 480 to 323 BCE. It's really influenced by that Peloponnesian War. This is Athens versus Sparta. Athens is the focused on logic and government and democracy, and Sparta's focused on war and military and defense, and they go head to head and kind of duke it out for a while. Lots of little tiny wars in between. So they're not getting along. What's going to end up happening is Alexander the Great, the one that burned down the Apandana, he's going to unite Greece under Macedonia. So brand new empire, still kind of considered Greek depending on who you ask. Once Alexander the Great unifies Greece and then dies, we have that Hellenistic period. So 323 to about 30 BCE. So Alexander, big old Macedonian empire. However, when he dies, he was kind of a big deal. If you lose your good leader and you don't have someone ready to pick up those pieces, the pieces fall apart. So Hellenistic Greece is kind of Greece ending, crumbling slowly for a few hundred years there. Eventually, Rome's going to conquer the area. They're going to copy-paste Greek culture, but do their own thing. So that's the end there, is Rome taking over. So archaic, classical, Hellenistic. And the history is going to influence how the art looks. So just that heads up of what these cultural periods are looking like before we dive in to the actual artistic movements. To understand Greece, you have to understand kind of what they value within their culture. We talked about culture when we talked about Mesopotamia, things like religion and clothing and hierarchies and government and art and technology and social practices, all super important to understanding who the Mesopotamians were and how the Sumerians were different than the Babylonians, who were different than the Neo-Assyrians. Greece has got its own big collective culture that is so pervasive that these ideals continue forth for European history traditions. And then when we get into the Renaissance, they come back with a slightly different flavor. And then neoclassical and all the stuff we do later still comes back to these major Greek ideals. And this is me pulling kind of what I think of when I think of the Greeks. Number one, this one in the center here, humanism. You have to understand humanism to understand the Greeks. A big shift happens within Greek culture in which they say that people are actually important as individuals. So instead of just the collective community or a god king or a pharaoh or just that whole of society, the person themselves is important, not just like their their soul, but the person. So the idea of the individual being important really branches into everything they do and how they approach their art. We're going to focus on people and artists and the thinking that people can do. So kind of using humanism, philosophy is super important. When you care about people, you care about how people think. So philosophy starts developing as a huge part of what makes the Greeks the Greeks. We get people like Aristotle and Socrates and Plato, and they're talking about deep psychological things before psychology is a founded science. This is the thinking about your thinking. This is what is the truth? Is there truth? Can we even find like what a truth is? This is historians asking about phone calls that happen in the middle of a video. So also, and according to humanism, we do see mathematics being an important factor in these Greek ideals, because once again, we're tying to the individual, and they are looking at math that's developed from other cultures, and they're building upon those mathematics and cementing them under different theorems, and they're naming them after the people who quote unquote discovered them, depending on who you talk to. Like the Pythagorean theorem. So Pythagoras is the person. He gets his own theory named after him, even though the math was there before. Now they're cementing it and tying it to an individual. So we see some developments in mathematics and making it important within the Greek culture. So they're going to use math in their art. And usually we don't think of math and art going together, but math and art are like always best friends hanging out, even when we don't think about it. Politics is also going to be important. Politics is always important in every single culture. We're going to see a very different type of political practices happening, especially in Athens, where we are doing a lot of our focus in AP Art History is Athens. And it's because democracy happens. The idea of everyone gets a vote. And specifically, Greece is looking at direct democracy, in which they are voting on everything. They're not voting for a person to represent them that then makes the decisions. No, they bring it to their governing body and they vote on every individual law. It's a lot deeper than that. Problem with their politics is that when I say everybody, I mean not everybody. It is who they consider a citizen. So those are the Greek men that own a certain percent of property, income, etc. So it's already being exclusionary to what everybody means. However, it is that starting point for the democratic political system. Religion-wise, we're looking at another polytheistic culture. So just like Mesopotamia, just like Egypt, we see these gods popping up in the Minoan and Mycenaean cultures. And it's very similar types of gods. You have a sun god, you have a god of gods, you have god of war, all those kind of things. Very similar to our other polytheistic cultures we've looked at so far. These gods tend to be a little bit different because they're a little more human. They make mistakes, they have faults, and the Greeks kind of pride the gods in being kind of more human. Again, humanism. These are individuals. You have Zeus, you have Poseidon, you have Hades, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, gods that are so interesting to Greece and then to Europe that they keep kind of bringing the Greek gods back. So I could turn on Disney Plus, watch Percy Jackson, learn about these gods that were believed in for realsies, 2,000 years ago. So it's really interesting to see that this one kind of sticks around as something interesting, and I really feel that's that humanism connection. We do know a lot of Egyptian gods, not as much as we do the Greek gods. And the Mesopotamian gods, poor babies, are lost and forgotten except for us nerds that like to still study Shamash and etc. And then lastly, the human form. Human form is going to be so important for what we are looking at, especially with those statues. We are going to see this humanistic approach in which they are appreciating the human body and finding this idealism in musculature. So especially in men, we're going to see this quote unquote perfect defined form, this idealism as defined by the Greeks, and then it will be as defined by mathematics that the Greeks really like. So reminder that ideal matches the culture. It is not just like perfect, quote unquote. It is the perfect form for that culture. Ideal spear bearer here is not the same as ideal Bundu mask. Both ideal, very different approaches. We are going to skip some videos because they are private, but something that is interesting if you want to kind of see Greek art kind of be played with is the Hercules movie from Disney. We also have, if you are interested in more in-depth analysis of Greek culture, the Fleet videos. You can always check out her stuff on YouTube. She is a blessing. So Fleet slides and Fleet videos. All right. Now we're here at the Archaic period. So we have two archaic statues that we are going to be looking at and seeing how the human form is being represented within the time period of about 600 to 480 BCE. And the reason why he's over here in a corner is because that smile of his is going to be super important for understanding how to identify the archaic art style. If you look at it, think about, as we're moving into our notes, think about what you notice. What does it look like? How does this compare to our Egyptian stuff, our Mesopotamian stuff? How are they being represented? So our first archaic piece that we are looking at is known as the Anavisos Koros. Anavisos, Koros. Koros means ideal young man. We'll get into Anavisos in a second, but this term, Koros, refers to any young male statue. So, big term. Our archaic Greek culture historical period. Our date here is 530 BCE. We know that because they wrote it. And then our media is marble with remnants of paint. So marble is a big media for Greece and then especially Rome. A lot of our statues are going to shift away from things like granite, which we saw in the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, or limestone like the Sphinx at Giza, and we're shifting towards marble. It's got a real pretty sheen to it. It has kind of a sparkle. When we get to go to the museums, really take a look at what marble looks like in person. It is beautiful. And it holds its form really well. You could do a lot with marble. It was a painted statue, just like our Sphinx, just like Menkaure and Queen, just like seated scribe. You could kind of see the paint remnants there. A lot of that red pigment sticks around, but beyond that, most of the paint has worn away with time. So talking about some important vocab, already mentioned it, but really want to hit that. Humanism is this philosophical idea that emphasizes the individual and social potential and agency of human beings, so people can do things. Idealism is the practice of forming or pursuing ideals, especially unrealistically. It is ideal, it's not real, it's ideal. So again, that idealism for them is going to look different than idealism in another culture. In the round is a term that we can use to describe any freestanding sculpture where we see all the sides. So instead of a relief that is only seen from one side, it is in the round. We've already looked at in the round sculptures, just want to make sure you know the term in the round to help describe that it is fully three-dimensional. Specific to this statue in Greece, we're looking at some other vocab here. Acropolis. Acropolis is any citadel or complex that is built on a high hill. Acro, like acrobats, means high. Polis means city, so high city. So the Anavisos Koros and many of our statues are found on the Acropolis. We will get to the Acropolis later. Hi Parthenon, how you doing? And then a citadel, we've had the citadel of Darius and Xerxes at Persepolis already, but a citadel is any like core fortified area of a town or a city. It's kind of like the main building. A city-state, I mentioned earlier, a city-state is a city that includes its surrounding territory and it forms an independent state. Lastly here, a plane. A plane, as in not the thing that flies in the sky, we're not there yet. A plane refers to any flat surface and any distinct flat surface within like a painting or a sculpture. We can call those planes. So the planes of the face have very specific like three-dimensional qualities. Planes are really hard without seeing a diagram. I'm putting it out there now, and then we'll talk about planes more in the future. Here's some close-up of the Anavisos Koros in a higher quality image. On the left, you can see he's kind of broken up and re-glued back together. Think about Menkaure and Queen. Think about how they're representing the human body in Egypt, and then taking a look at our Anavisos Koros here. You can also think to our Lamassu and how they depict hair. Think about how the Lamassu's hair compares to our Anavisos Koros's hair. Here's some more close-ups showing off that hairstyle a little bit more in the face, that smile, gonna be important. And what's insane to me is, this is still like early Greece, but looking at the muscle structure on the Koros statue here, insane. He has a clearly defined belly button, he has abdominals, you can see his rib cage, you can see his knees locked into place. And this is a block of stone. We're gonna start hitting this period where we start moving away from thinking this is an artwork, and we're gonna start talking about it accidentally as if they're real people. So just remember that someone sculpted this. It's kind of insane. It's a rock, and they made it look like flesh. Here's different angles of him. He's got a butt. So you see the muscle structure continues all the way around, so he is in the round. But that interesting thing about that hair again, and he has taken some damage to the face. You could see that in the nose area especially. He is quite large. You could see the people in the background there, so he is larger than life. If you want to see another famous Koros statue, this Koros here, you can click on the link. It's a slightly earlier one. So you can see how the Archaic period really starts more with the style of Koros statues versus the Anavisos one. He's kind of more late Archaic, so closer towards nearing the classical style. Here's some other Koros statues. as you look at them, think about what is similar. What do all of them share? What parts look the same? And then what looks different? So, I bring Menkaure and Queen back in here because as we look at our Anavisos Koros in the center and the earlier Koros statue on the left, and then Menkaure and Queen on the right, we're seeing how the Greeks are influenced by the Egyptians. They're happening at the same time. End of Egypt and beginning of Greece kind of overlap. So the Greeks know about Egypt. Menkaure's way earlier. Remember the Cleopatra fun fact, right? So the Greeks are seeing the artworks and artifacts of ancient Egypt and their styles and their influence because they're both on the Mediterranean Sea. So the Greeks are using the same format for the body. Something that was only allowed for the pharaohs in Egypt is being used on the everyday person in Greece. You have the left foot forward. You have the static frontal pose. You have the gripped fists at the side. But you have more muscle. You have more definition. You have more of an average hairstyle that is stylized. You have a smile. And you have no clothes on. So lots of the shift can be seen between Menkaure and Anavisos. What you can do if you would like to listen to the Smart History video is take a look at that link, watch Smart History. I am going to talk about the visual contextual for Anavisos. So visually, when we look at Anavisos Koros, overall we're looking at an idealized male figure. For Greece, idealized means they're lean, they're very musculature. We have the Egyptian style stance. They're tense, they're flexing the muscles, so it's a strong stance. It's stepping forward with that left foot. It's the gripping of the fists at the side. It has a feeling of stability and strength. That's why it was reserved for the pharaohs before. Now again, not a pharaoh. We have an artwork that is completely naked, which will tie into our context, but it's showing off realistic and generally proportional anatomy. So it's a naturalistic approach. You can have both naturalistic and idealized. You can have both stylized and idealized. Idealized is not its own category. It's like an extra bonus. When we look at the hair, it is very neatly braided. It has kind of a clear pattern that feels very different from how the muscles are being portrayed. Our hair is a lot more stylized. It is more like Mesopotamian hair. He is larger than life, about 6'4", and we have this representation of ideal male youth. That means Koros. Koros literally means youth. So that's why it's called a Koros statue, ideal male youth. You will have to know that a Koros statue is an ideal male youth. More visual, we have, again, that's naturalistic with stylized elements. So the anatomy is natural, the muscles are natural, but the hair is stylized. I say slightly abstract, but it's really just stylized. Swirling patterns, contrasting with the body, neat rows, very organized. For Anavisos, this is the standard of what they think of as the perfect male body. Lean, muscular, but still like has a little bit of meat in the like hip area, the arms. It is what the Greeks considered perfect. We do have a little bit of movement with the 1 foot forward that's in the round. You can walk around it. You can see his backside, therefore he's not a relief. Pattern in the hair, very subtle forms for the muscles. It's not like female deity where you have like harsh lines depicting different parts of the body. It is a natural curvature. The planes, the differences between like the pectoral plane versus the rib cage plane are more gradual. There is a sense of weight to it because of how the muscle looks. he looks like he's standing there. He's not going to tip over. And that's both visually and literally. Marble's heavy. So it's being carefully constructed and carved. And they're doing the carving subtractively. We'll talk more about that later. But they basically take one big block of marble and just chunk away at it. And then we also see those remnants of paint. So when we think of Greek statues, we always start putting into our heads that they're actually all supposed to be white marble, and that's part of the Greek appeal there. But no, they would have been very brightly colored. When we are looking at this transition between Egypt to Proto-Greece, this archaic stuff, we do see, again, that more naturalistic change. So they're using Egyptian sculptures as their base, but the Greeks start to approach the style a lot more naturalistic. Egyptian sculptures, the head tended to be a lot longer or larger. The muscles were very flat planes, so more square, more geometric. Now on Avisos, we see those forms being rounded. We have cheeks that are filled out on the face. We have the muscles that are more filled out. The hair isn't as stiff. It falls more naturally on the body, even though it's still stylized. And then we have a very different approach to the hips. The hips are a lot more fleshy. They feel more properly weighted. They're a little bit more ambiguous in the gender. It's not these two sticks attached to a torso. It's an actual muscle structure of a leg. Contextually, so looking at who we are actually staring at, who this is, how it functions, the Anavisos Koros is actually a grave marker. It does a little bit more than just mark a grave, but because it has writing on the bottom, we know that sometime around 530 BCE that a man named Croesus died a hero's death, meaning that he fought in war. So his family, who, if you're, buying a marble statue of your son or family member, they got some money, they pay an artist to make this statue that represents Croesus. It doesn't look exactly like him because A, we don't know what he looks like, but B, because this is an idealized statue, that it's representing just the idea of a young man. They put this grave marker in Anavisos, hence the name Anavisos Koros, so that's where his grave is. It's a little out of Athens area. The paint is on there, so we have some idea of what it could have looked like, but not 100% what it was fully painted as. Again, that red pigment really shines through. On the bottom, so you can see there's a pedestal, that's where the writing is. In Greek, we see it say, and invites visitors to stay and mourn at the tomb of dead Croesus, whom raging Ares destroyed one day as he fought in the foremost ranks. That saying means that he died in battle. Ares is the god of war, and they're saying, come look, this man died for Anavisos, died for Athens, died for Greece. Be like him. Be good for the community. If you're gonna die a hero, fight the wars. So the Anavisos Koros functions as propaganda. It's encouraging more people to join the military, while it's also marking someone's grave. So it's got a double-sided function there. We see the concept of death is starting to shift. We do not have that same concept of the afterlife and mummification that we saw in Egypt. They're more enjoy life now. There is ideas of an underworld as Hades and the fields of Elysium and all this mythological stuff. But the Greeks are more focused about the here and now. Death is going to still be treated with a lot of respect, but how you die is also going to be important. So his death being for the city-state is almost like a competition. It's be like this guy. So really interesting transition there. So kind of restating things I've already said, Koros is going to be set up by a very aristocratic family. So we have a clear hierarchy. There is status based on wealth here. And this is representing his grave. So Croesus' grave. It is not a portrait, but it is idealized male youth. The Anavisos Koros itself, for like art history's sake, is one that they look at as a transition between the earlier Koros statues to classical Greek statues. So you could kind of see that transition from the stylized to the naturalistic, slightly stylized to way naturalistic. And that's going to be a mathematical naturalistic. We'll get into Spear Bear later. So we see that transition happening further. This focus on realism and naturalism really shows how the Greeks loved that human form. They wanted to understand humans, the natural environment, the world around them. They're not as concerned with the afterlife. They're concerned with life in the human body, human form. So they're using Egypt again as that base, but they're becoming their own culture based off of humanism. More context for the Archaic period and why marble is starting to become a go-to media is because we are introducing iron chisels. So iron is going to be a lot harder than bronze, which is also commonly used. It's the Bronze Age first, a lot easier to smelt. Iron's stronger. Because iron is so strong, you can start carving harder stones. Marble's a very hard stone, especially when trying to sculpt with it. So that gift there, you can see they're chiseling away that block of marble. So that's how Anavisos Koros starts, is this block of marble and then gets to this smooth, refined form. So they chisel, they file, they smooth it out, and this long period of time, all from one block. We do not know who the artist is for Anavisos Koros. It was more about Croesus, again, that grave marker there, and his dying in battle, which was the best way to die, be like Croesus. But the artists, we're not sure. The idea also, with him being so tall, being at this grave, showing this like perfect male body, is to get people to think. So I'm walking by Anavisos Koros and I go, oh, poor Croesus, so sad, but at least he died a hero. I'm thinking about my own mortality and how I want to die. And you start philosophizing. Yes, I'm making that word up. And you're like, oh, maybe I should be like him and die in battle. And that all helps by using that archaic smile. Archaic smile is the number one way of telling if it is an archaic statue. We're going to skip the fleet slides for a second. Here is the archaic smile. So the archaic smile is just a little like, hey guys, how you doing? Just a little tiny grin, super happy. And what they're showing using the archaic smile is the idea that life is good. Death is good. We're chilling. So death is not something to be feared. It just is. So that's the archaic smile saying everything's good. My death is fine. My afterlife is fine. So the archaic smile represents well-being. Make sure you understand the archaic smile, and you can look at that cheeky little grin and go, ah, yes, the archaic period. And then we'll get to the Etruscans and confuse things a little bit. But that's a later problem. So the archaic smile is going to be used a lot. Know it. Love it. Even if you're stabbing yourself in the abdomen, you smile in death. Yay, archaic. And then once again, talking about function. I know, repeating a lot, but very important to understand these. Number one, function. Choros represent those male youth. This is not the only one. There are thousands. And choros statues most commonly were used either as grave markers, like this one. They were used as offerings to the gods. And then sometimes they were also representing a god. That was less common, but usually Apollo he's like the god of the sun and art and stuff, and he was seen as the ideal male youth as well. So choros statues, again, are grave markers, offerings to gods, or representing gods. This one in particular is a grave marker. And propaganda to be like Anavisos Choros, be like Croesus. All right. Anavisos Choros, big chunky artwork. So please make sure you have those notes, you understand them. If any point you were like, I don't know what you're saying, Miss K, just go back, rewatch it, or check out the Smart History video if you want to hear someone else talking about them. So Anavisos Choros represented the ideal male form. So we're going to take a look at a lady. So at the same time, the Archaic period, and pretty much really close on the same year here with 530 BCE, we have the Peplos Chore from the Acropolis. And Chore or Chore, both pronunciations I've heard, they work. Peplos Chore. Peplos Chore. So you can see Chore, oh, that kind of sounds like Choros. I wonder why. Interesting. But the Peplos Chore from the Acropolis. The Acropolis we will get to later. That's where it was found. So short title, Peplos Chore. We are looking once again at marble. You can tell by that white stone texture and color. And once again, we have painted details. Her paint is a lot more obvious than Anavisos. Again, that red pigmentation on it, very clear. It stains a lot more. She's really interesting. I adore Peplos Chore. So here's some close-ups. As we're looking at Peplos Chore, I want you thinking, how is she different from Anavisos Choros? Why is she different from Anavisos Choros? How is the way they're depicting her, what does that tell us about how the Greeks view women? The state that she is in, her arm is broken off. That arm is like super important. So wish we had that arm because it's going to tie into who the heck she is, because we don't know. Also, look, there's holes. Not only have they invented iron chisels, but they've also invented iron drills. Not like a electrical drill yet, but like a hand cranky drill. Very technical term. So that's interesting. Wonder why there's holes in her head. Here's the backside. You can see it's kind of segmented because broken and repaired. Here is a recreation of one of the possible colorations. So this is kind of just heightening the colors that we see. Crazy, all of that design in detail. Interesting how that just appeared. So there are faint remnants of designs on her dress, which is known as a peplos. So this is just that recreation based off of what we can see. It could have been very different. We don't know for sure. Again, the paint has worn off. So there's a lot of different interpretations of what the paint could have looked like. So just keep in mind, no matter what, it would have been brightly colored. You'll also notice in these recreations some different stuff going on. This one still has no hand. That one has a hand. Oh, bow and arrow? Whoa, things in her head? Interesting. A pomegranate. I've never heard of pomegranates being important in ancient Greece before. Here's some other Chore statues, just to give you some idea. Interesting how we got some arms missing, arms up. Egyptian figures as well. Very different approach. So taking a look at Peplos Chore, and an Egyptian statue standing. They're still using the Egyptian style to inform them, but the approach to women is a little different. For Peplos Kore, bumped microphone, sorry. I do want you watching Smart History video, so you can go ahead, open that up, watch the video, take your visual contextual notes. They go into it super, super well. If you are more into reading, you can use the website instead to read through. The Acropolis, we are going to come back to, but that's where they found her, was right there. So this is in Athens, very tippy top. So you could take a look through. We know we love our Smart History, and they've updated it. It's great. All right. And then the fleet videos as well. A couple things I do want to highlight, though, going back to our girl here. So some highlights from the video that I want to make sure that you have written in your visual contextuals. Number one, we don't know who she is. Because of that missing arm, we don't know what she was holding, and what she was holding would have been a big determining factor in who she is. Typically, Kore statues are representing ideal female youth. Kore, ideal female youth. So she could be a representation of just an ideal female. Because she was found on the Acropolis, which is one of the major areas of temples and worship, we think she may be more towards that offering to the god, or maybe she could be a god herself. Some ideas of why she could be a god is because of these drill marks. There was most likely metal of some kind that was placed in the stone. The thing about metal, though, is metal can make weapons, and metal expensive, and it's a lot lighter than a block of marble, so yeah, those things are going to get stolen. So her drill marks here, she was probably wearing a diadem being kind of like a tiara, like a crown of some kind. So it could have, like the recreations show, been something like this. We don't know. More likely something like that, according to other styles of Greek sculpture. But again, it's based off of speculation and evidence. And then in her hand, what she could have been holding would have helped us determine who she was. If you look at her fist here, it's not entirely closed. It has a little gap here, also drilled to potentially hold something. This is where this reconstruction kind of accounts for that. She's holding arrows. And if you're holding arrows, you're probably going to be holding a bow. So one interpretation is that she could be representing Artemis or Athena, but Artemis was the goddess of the hunt. So she was often depicted with bow and arrow. Other interpretations, because she is an ideal female youth, is she could be Persephone. Persephone, often seen with a pomegranate or representing pomegranate. She's the goddess of spring. And she is also a goddess of the underworld after the story of Persephone and Hades, him stealing her and dragging her to Hades, the whole thing. Lore Olympus, read that if you're interested. Fun little interpretation of the story. So she could be Persephone, she could be Artemis. Because this is Athens, she could be Athena. We don't know. There's no writing about her. She's broken. We're doing our best with what we have. And the more they find out about her, the more solid we're going to line up with who she actually is. Peplos is the style of outfit, so make sure you have that in your visual. So it's this, it's not even actually a peplos. It's they call it a peplos, but it's more like a chiton, a very specific Greek dress and attire. The braids are very similar to Anavisos Koros, but the big difference on how they're representing women is the fact that she is clothed. So ideal males are naked, ideal females are clothed. So we have an early divide in how they're approaching female and males and their role. So women, not citizens, not allowed to vote, and when you're depicting them, cover them up. You can't show those bits. You can only show the bits of men. That's what we think is more important, is men bits than female bits. And we'll get into that a little bit more later. So her being clothed, who she is, and those visual contextual factors, make sure you have from the Smart History video. That's the major archaic period. For your homework, I want you guys taking a look at the tradition and change of Doryphorus. So make sure for homework you're doing tradition and change of Doryphorus. We'll go over these statues in class, but make sure you have your notes done.